I want this to be a nightmare. I don't want this to be my life.
This story is so hard to make sense of because there is so much loss inside a home. A mom killing her husband and 2 of her kids, leaving 1 toddler unharmed. And there's no question that this family was going through more in a few months than most will ever be able to handle in a lifetime. But now there's new information coming to light that the mom, who spoke about her struggles as the spouse of someone fighting brain cancer who carried out a terrible tragedy in her home, had dark financial secrets that go back nearly a decade. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. We are going to be very delicate in telling this story because there is a lot to unpack, there is a lot of tragedy, and we are talking about a story where a man and his 2 children lost their lives at the hand of a woman who is clearly struggling. But beyond the family tragedy that happened inside their Madbury, New Hampshire home on August 18th, there is more information that is coming to light this week that Emily Long allegedly had a pattern of stealing from places where she worked. In the wake of the murders of her husband, her daughter, and her son, her employer said that Long had stolen more than $660,000 from his business between January of 2023 and July of this year. And now there are new allegations that she allegedly stole from her employer in 2016, and I'll get more into that in just a moment. But first I want to break down what authorities in New Hampshire said happened on August 18th. It was around 8 o'clock that night that they were called to this home. Inside, they found 4 people dead. 48-year-old Ryan Long, his 8-year-old son Parker, and his 6-year-old daughter, also named Ryan. The 3 of them had been shot, and they also found the body of Ryan's wife and the kid's mom, Emily, who is 34 years old. Law enforcement found the gun near the family, they say, and they pieced together what they say happened inside the house, that Emily had shot the 3 family members, then turned the gun on herself. The couple also had a toddler, and that boy was not hurt. I'll have more on how you can help him in just a moment. Now, there's no question that this family was struggling, that Emily was struggling. In April, her husband Ryan was diagnosed with brain cancer.
It's just hard to have this life and have absolutely nothing in my control.
Emily had gained a following on TikTok by sharing her struggles. Her bio read, "Brain cancer wife." She said talking about mental health to her followers on social media was, quote, cheaper than therapy.
It's just like, okay, now we have totally lost control. At least when he was going through radiation, I know that it's been hard on him. I know that it's been exhausting. His brain is swollen. He feels so many symptoms. That has been hard for me as a partner to watch. But now we're in a phase of monitoring where like reoccurrence can happen, where during radiation, it has totally halted. So I feel a lot of anxiety about that.
This was her last post before the murders.
Okay, I put makeup on and real clothes for the first time. Basically, makeup since we went to the Cape in July, and real clothes in God only knows how long. So I'm trying to get myself out of this rut. I know that I've said this before, but our kids are definitely struggling, and now I'm starting to notice some changes in our 3-year-old, which is tough because he's too young for therapy. I know that people are going to say play therapy. We've done that before, and I just don't really see the benefit in it, and he's too young for talk therapy, obviously. But like, for example, last night he just couldn't sleep. He was up all night long. He was crying. He's never like that. And I've been starting to notice him stirring more at night and just have a harder time. And it's just devastating. But I am determined to create normalcy. We're going to go down the street to our neighbors who are our close friends with a bunch of our other friends. I don't think that my husband will come. Maybe he will, because it's right down the street. It's just a couple houses down. But it's important for my kids to be with their friends. And I have been struggling so much and really depressed and just have really become reclusive and just wanted to be with my kids and my husband. And while that might feel good for me, I don't think that that's good for me. So, that being said, I am making a change. It is starting today. I am going to start getting dressed. I am going to probably not put makeup on because I don't really wear makeup very often unless I'm going somewhere, but I need to become more social again. I used to be like the most social human on this planet, and the past month I have basically declined 98% of all offers, and my kids need to be with their friends. So, hold me to it. Today, I am adjusting my perspective, and I'm making a point to get out of my depression and do this for my family. So, that being said, happy Saturday. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. I'm going to have a fantastic day.
No one will ever know what happened inside that home on August 18th. No one will ever understand the true motivation for what police say Emily did. But in the wake of the murders, it came to light that she was also feeling pressure related to concerns about what she had allegedly done financially, the pressures of a criminal investigation. Emily was the director of operations for a chicken wing restaurant company in New Hampshire that has multiple locations. Her employer told WCVB TV out of Boston that Emily was under investigation for allegedly stealing from the company dating all the way back to the beginning of 2023. He said that he noticed that cash deposits weren't going into business accounts and handwritten checks were going into Emily's bank account. When he added up the losses, he claims that Emily stole more than $660,000 from his company. Now, even though Emily had allegedly been taking from her company long before her husband's cancer diagnosis, her employer said that he tried to handle the situation with Emily with grace, that he had scheduled a meeting for them to talk about the allegations of theft on August 11th. A week later, police say she killed 3 members of her family. She never showed up to that meeting on August 11th. All right, before we get back to this episode of On the Case, I need to take a moment, pause, and talk about our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. They have more than 1,000 attorneys, and they win a lot. They've recovered over $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. And in just the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. And another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. So even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to file a claim. You can do it with just 8 clicks on your phone. So if you've been hurt and you need to start a claim, go to www.forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also scan this QR code on your screen or click the link below. Now this week, there is new reporting that's coming out from the Boston Globe that claims that Emily's employer, the chicken wing restaurant in New Hampshire, was not the first employer she allegedly stole from. The paper writes that in 2016, authorities on the island of Nantucket in Massachusetts investigated Long for allegedly stealing thousands of dollars from a brew pub that she worked at. The paper claims that Long and her then boyfriend stole $11,000 in cash and alcohol and then went on vacation to Thailand. The two of them were fired by the brew pub, and then, when Long returned to the United States, she was arraigned on check forgery charges, but that case was dismissed after the pub went out of business, according to the Boston Globe. Long's former employer of that chicken wing restaurant company in New Hampshire says that not only did she steal $660,000, but now he's also, in hindsight, looking back on conversations that they had, that he believes that she potentially had a shopping addiction, that might have created the issue of her stealing allegedly from his company. In fact, he said that Long herself stated that she had a shopping addiction, and she also said that being on a budget should be a, quote, crime against humanity. Of course, how does all of this factor into the tragedy that took place on August 18th? That is something that we may never know. Joining us now to talk about this is retired detective commander with the Chicago Police Department, Will Svilar. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. This is a really, really tough case for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot to unpack. But first, I think I go back to what happened in that house on August 18th. And the big question, is just, you have this young boy who survived. I guess we'll never know the answer to the question of why, but I think as a detective, if you were investigating this case, what are some of the things when you respond to a story like this, to a call like this, that you have to piece together in putting the story together?
Well, the big thing that you talked about is why did she leave the one boy alive? If she was going to do a murder-suicide and she was worried about being identified, if she wanted, well, not a suicide, but a murder, worried about being identified afterwards, you take the witnesses out. But if you're going to do a murder-suicide, why leave the one kid? Now, what I've seen over the years is when you have a situation where children are murdered, in a lot of the cases, the children that get murdered are not the actual biological children of the person who's doing the murdering. Very difficult to kill your own child. Now, I don't have any idea if any of that is any impact on this case. As a matter of fact, there's nothing to say that those weren't all her kids. But when I start running scenarios through my head about why one kid is left alive while the others aren't, the thing that comes up in my experience is the fact that sometimes the biological children are left behind.
And the most recent development in this story is, the allegations of embezzlement. There was the story that came out a couple weeks ago with the $660,000 from her employer in New Hampshire. Then now a story from the Boston Globe in 2016. She was accused of stealing $11,000. She was working at a bar of some kind in Nantucket. Her and her boyfriend, they were the employees who got fired. When you piece together, you try to put together who this person is, and eventually things lead up to a terrible ending to the story on August 18th. But what do you make of that part of it, where you see something back in 2016 on a smaller scale compared to what she was accused of doing in 23 to 25?
Well, you obviously you see the pattern there. She's got some kind of problems with money. She takes $11,000 from a small company, but then moves up to $600,000 with this company. That's a big jump. But I mean, nobody starts out, maybe you start out stealing a pack of gum and you move up from there. But when you talk about that kind of money being stolen between one company and another, there's obviously a pattern. She's got some kind of problems with spending. And maybe she saw that it was the $600,000 was something she was going to get put in jail for sure. Didn't see any other way out. But when you talk about financial crimes and violent crimes, it's two different things. Usually people who have financial crime problems are not coming back and committing multiple murders. So this is a very perplexing case.
Yeah, because let's talk about the larger amount of money that she's accused of taking. She was working for like a chicken wing restaurant chain that's out of New Hampshire called Wingett's, and the owner has said that she had taken about $660,000, which is an incredible amount of money between 2023 and 2025. If she were to actually face charges for that amount of money, I mean, what type of punishment could she have received taking more than $500,000 from a business?
Well, I mean, she's looking at some time in prison for sure. I mean, she's not looking at like murder time or violent crime time, but she's looking at time in prison and probably restitution. But $600,000 in a small business is something that you would think would be, they'd catch it at 100,000 or 200 or 300. I know before you bring criminal charges in financial crime cases, you have to do a independent forensic audit. In other words, you as the victim have to have an audit done, and then you have to present it to law enforcement and say, okay, listen, we have this forensic audit, this money's missing, we think this person did it. So the police won't do that. You have to have a separate forensic audit, and that's in Chicago, I know. Again, about other jurisdictions, I'm not sure, but you do that forensic audit, then the police take over and you do the criminal charges. So she's looking at prison time, but not 20 years.
Well, and I think too, I mean, there is that question of how did you not know that amount of money, this is not a major, I think if an employee had taken $660,000 from McDonald's, they would have noticed it, not, necessarily just a small chain in New Hampshire. But I mean, how does it get to that point that you've seen in some of these financial crimes cases where the tab can just run up and get to the point where you realize, and apparently in this case, she was accused of getting to the point where it'd be this amount of money, and it was a pattern that the owner had said gone back to January of 23.
So the question I have for that is, what capacity was she employed in that company where she had access so she could funnel that kind of money off? That's one question. But when you talk about, listen, this kind of stuff happens through all walks of life. We've seen it in clergy, we've seen it in business, everywhere. And I see a lot of the problem being gambling. People get gambling debts, and then as a gambler, you think I just need one hit to make it all right, and that one hit never comes. So now you get farther and farther down the road, and now you're at multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're not going to make that back. So I see gambling as a motive in a lot of these things. But as far as her thing goes, they say she had a shopping addiction, but that's it's a lot of Amazon.
It really is, and maybe people have that as an addiction, but to think of that amount of money is just it's incredible, and to think of you look at for someone to get to the point where they would do what she's accused of doing, of what police say she did inside that house on August 18th. I mean, obviously, she was saying that her husband was going through this terrible medical diagnosis, and you think of the pressure that comes with that. But then at the same time, she's potentially, and I guess a week earlier, she didn't show up for a meeting on August 11th where the owner of the business was going to talk to her about the amount of money. So she knew that was coming down the tracks as well. But to think of, I mean, how common do you see the motive for something like this be, whether it's that medical diagnosis or a financial situation that had turned criminal, as far as an investigation was concerned, to actually lead to something as horrific as what happened inside the house?
Not often. Not often at all. If you see financial things, usually it's a suicide. They usually don't take their family out. When you see a murder over a mercy killing, over someone who's suffering from cancer, it's usually older people, and it's usually a murder-suicide for just the two people involved. I mean older people, people in their 80s who want to end the suffering of the other person and they want to go with them. But for a younger family, you just don't see this that often. With that being a motive, you just don't see a lot of it.
And for you, I mean, when you respond to something like this, and apparently there were 911 callers outside the house when police arrived, so you knew that it was not, it was a welfare check, but it wasn't like someone didn't show up for work that day, and you're really unsure of what's going to happen behind the door. You knew that something potentially involving a gun, I would assume, if 911 callers were calling in, having heard that shot in a quiet New Hampshire neighborhood. I mean, what is it like as a police officer to respond to that type of call where you don't know what happened behind the door that you're about to walk into?
Well, you're right about that. When you're responding to a call like that, I mean, we just had 3 policemen killed in Pennsylvania, serving a warrant for a domestic situation. You just don't know if someone's waiting for you, so you have to be on alert. It's a well-being check, like you said. You don't have any idea what's going on in there, so you have to treat it when you make entry to that residence. You have to treat it like you have an active shooter or a live shooter, or there's some sort of threat on law enforcement, so you have to clear the rooms. Now, as you start to progress into the house, it starts to paint a picture for you of what happened. Regardless, you don't stop at the first thing you see. You have to continue on through the house and clear the house, which is where I'm sure they found the child that survived. But it's a weird feeling. Once you get rid of the adrenaline of clearing the house, and maybe now I don't have any more danger. Now you have to process what you're seeing, and as you secure the scene as the primary officers. When the detectives come in, now you have to try to piece this together. And looking at something like that, it takes a while to process, and you have to put your personal feelings aside, and you have to do your job.
Yeah, and to think of what that scene looked like is just horrific. I mean, from a forensic standpoint, I know in this case that the weapon that was used was found near the family, so that's certainly a major clue about what this was, as opposed to it being someone who would have escaped and had committed this crime. But what are some of the forensics that you use to prove, beyond just the gun actually just being there, but what can actually be done to prove that you can, because they were pretty quick to say that this was a case where she had shot them and then she had turned the gun on herself.
There's a lot of things that you have to look at, and what you're talking about as far as a weapon goes, a weapon holds most of that. Ballistics from the expended shells, gunshot residue on her hand, and where it is on her hand, back of her hand, palm of her hand, to say that she's the one that handled the weapon. Contact wounds as opposed to wounds from far away, stippling, the entrance and exit wounds of a self-inflicted contact wound are very much different from one from a distance. And you think about the capacity of the weapon. My thought going into this is maybe after she killed her family, she only had one left for herself. It could be something just that strange where the boy was was spared. In a different room, everything happens in one room, and she's got one left. So there's a lot of forensics that come from that firearm. And again, like you said, they said pretty quick how it went down. So I'm thinking of proximity of the weapon and those things that I talked about, the stippling and the gunshot residue. All that would probably indicate that she's the only one that fired that weapon.
And as far as, this just being a very unique case, I mean, I just can't overstate the amount of sadness that there is for the loss of life, and then just the circumstances that she said this family was under. But, I also think in a lot of these cases, unfortunately, at least what we've covered, it's typically not the woman who is the one who ends up doing this. I mean, why is that? And typically, I guess, why is it typically you don't see a case like this? And because in the ones that I've covered, I mean, a lot of times it's the husband. Well,
I mean, I think it's just an innate nature to be more violent as a man. I don't know. I have no science to back that up, but I just know the experience that I see, just like you talk about, most violent crimes committed with firearms are done by men. If we talk about female suicides, most of the suicides I've seen by women are either pills or is asphyxiation, carbon monoxide poisoning. Rarely do you see a woman commit suicide with a firearm. Rarely. And for whatever, I'm sure there's somebody that has some psychological reasons of why that is, but I'm telling you from my personal experience, it's very rare to see a woman use a firearm in a crime.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of things that make the story stand out. As far as what happens next, because we've seen, this week the Boston Globe reporting comes out. It does seem like it's a lot of media outlets that are kind of piecing together some of the financial past that she had. But in a case like this, the person responsible is dead. The victims in this case, I mean, certainly this young toddler boy is a victim in this, and he's the lone survivor. But I mean, what more is done, as an investigator, to make sure that you have all the answers that you need? I mean, when does this case get closed? How much work is actually done to try to eventually figure out what the motive may have been?
So the case is pretty much closed already. It's going to be a murder-suicide. That portion of the case is closed based on the evidence we talked about, the event that happened in that house. Now, when you talk about the financial crimes, all the evidence to say that she was the offender of the financial crime has to be brought. You have to document it, and then you close that case out based on the death of the offender. We call it exceptionally clear closed, death of the offender. So there are other investigations, whatever other investigations come out, because you never know. There'll be something else that maybe comes up saying, oh no, we think she defrauded us on this GoFundMe or whatever. If there's a criminal case in this, obviously there's no criminal prosecution because the offender's dead. But there is an investigation. Criminal prosecution and police investigation are not the exact same thing. In this case, you have to put the facts in to prove that this is what in fact happened. No prosecution, but this person's responsible for this, this, and this. And because this person is now dead, these cases are closed.
Had she been, just going back to the $660,000, when it comes to restitution, because I just think of, I mean, it's a lot of money, and she would have, to your point, prison time, but it wasn't going to be life in prison. I mean, there's certainly a level of shame that would have come with it if she was accused and convicted of that, and all of that is true. But I mean, from like even a restitution standpoint, if she's not someone who would have that amount of money to pay back, I mean, what does that typically look like for someone if she was convicted of what the owner of her company had claimed that she did?
Assets. You go after assets, joint assets. You go after future employment, you garnish wages. Basically, you put on a really, really long payment plan to try to satisfy your responsibility of restitution. So it would be something she would probably never pay off, regardless of how long she lived.
Yeah, and it's just what a tough case, and we continue to get these updates that make it even tougher. Retired Detective Commander Will Svilar of the Chicago Police Department. Thank you as always for your time on Law and Crime and breaking this down for us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
There is a GoFundMe established for the toddler who survived on August 18th. You can see the link here. So far, it has raised more than $150,000. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.